Hey guys, Bill Vandermerva here from Trails for Tomorrow, or T for T, and I'm the president of the organization, and I'm happy to be here tonight.
And I'm your host, Wes. And thanks for coming on tonight, Bill. Really appreciate you taking the time. I know you got a super busy schedule, and appreciate you taking the time to speak with me tonight. We're without Trisha tonight. She's got to work, unfortunately. So we are going to be running solo, just the two of us guys, but it's still going to be a fun episode talking about the trails for tomorrow. Just want to give a shout out to our episode from last week, Jeepapalooza. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back, check it out. Jeepapalooza fundraising event over in Vancouver Island, British Columbia for cancer research. And over the last 10 years, they have raised $125,000 for cancer work on the Vancouver Island. So a wonderful organization and an incredible event. And everything I've heard about has been a lot of fun. So that happens on the May long weekend down on Vancouver Island. Check it out, Jeepapalooza. Next week, we've got a young couple from YouTube and Instagram called Finding Life's Moments. And they're a really neat couple, a couple empty nesters, and they're driving their Toyota Tacoma all over BC and just having a fun time. And so check them out next week, as well as on YouTube at Finding Life's Moments. Tonight, we're talking with Vil from Trails for Tomorrow, as we mentioned. And once again, thanks for joining me tonight, Vil.
Yeah, no, really happy to be here. Second time on the podcast. And honestly, I know it's been a little bit of time in the making here. We've been trying to connect for a while, but I'm really happy to be here and talk about T for T and all the great things we're doing.
Yeah, it's something you and I have been talking about behind the scenes and texting back and forth. And I'm really happy to have you on. The groups like T for T or the Four-Wheel Drive Association to BC. A couple weeks ago, we had the Ontario Federation of Four-Wheel Drive Recreationists on. These associations are so important to the future of our sport or our recreation. So whether you're an overlander or a four-wheeler, or a rock crawler, whatever, these organizations are key and to us being able to do this in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And I know there's lots of things going on in Alberta that it's a bit of a struggle, right? So maybe if you can explain to our listeners what the Trails for Tomorrow, or T4T, is all about.
Yeah, I think just going back to your statement there, I think it's really important. There's a lot of user groups out there, and there's not a lot of people really pushing for sustainability and making sure that we can keep these trails for our kids and our future generations. So I think it's really important for all of these groups to work together. Basically, T for T, the executive, we're a team of outdoor enthusiasts who want to make sure that our access to 4x4 trails remain open, not only for the enjoyment of the trails themselves, but also for the access to all our other activities that comes with these trails. So T for T really is a group of mixed use trail users. We enjoy a range of activities such as mountain biking, hiking, biking, fishing, etc. And vehicles really are the access point to all activities. And I think that's really important to stress. So where Trails for Tomorrow comes in is that we all love to go camping with our families. We want to go hiking down a nice trail that's not maybe quite as populated as if, for instance, from the Calgary area, Kananaskis, where anybody can go down Highway 66 and hike down a certain trail. If we can use our 4x4s to access those trails, now we can have a true nature experience where maybe we can go hike on something where there's nobody else around. And I think that's where T4T really comes in. I think we are all enthusiasts, we're all trail users, and we are all there to make sure that these areas are attainable for our kids in our future.
Yeah, I think it's super huge. And a lot of people don't realize the influence that organizations like T for T have and why we need to keep these organizations running. Because I've been involved in the Four-Wheel Drive Association for BC on and off for probably the last 25 years or so. And until you actually get involved with some of these associations, you don't realize the struggles that these associations are, fighting for, whether it be trail closures or just general red tape through the government, et cetera. And it's a constant battle. And a lot of people don't realize how important this work is, for sure.
Yeah. And I think a big portion of what we bring into the community is that education piece of what the government's doing, what other bodies, what other areas or groups within the area is doing. And without that kind of a mediator and a group that's in the middle of all of that to educate our community and our user groups. A lot of that information is lost or never really accessible for anybody. For instance, last year we spent a lot of time with different user groups like Eat Can Nastis Ghost or Trouts Unlimited. And while those groups might have this stigma of, oh, they're out there to shut down trails or they're trying to do these things that are hurting our community, really they're just looking for ways for us to do things better and to improve our sustainability aspect of these trails. And I think what we really try to bring to the community is that education piece. And we're not a police force. We're not a group of trying to push for rules on the trail. Obviously, there are certain rules the government sets forth that we all try to adhere to. T4T is a subscriber to Tread Lightly. We want all of our trail users to follow those basic principles, but our role is not really out there to call out bad apples and make a scene online and do all those things. Really, our approach is education. If we do see something, it's more of a private conversation versus a public type conversation where things get nasty and so forth.
Yeah, it definitely. I used to live in Calgary. I don't know if you knew that or not, but around 2000 area, I was in Calgary for a couple of years, and we would go out to Cypress or McLean. And back in those days, it definitely was not as nice of an area as it is now. I'm not sure exactly how it is now, but I remember going to the big mud pits and all that stuff because that was seemed to be all there was. But at that point, that's when we started hearing more about the tread lightly thing, not making new trails and all that. And throughout the years, a little bit of education, we all started educating ourselves as well as other people. And I think with your organization coming on board over the last 4 years or whatever it's been a big help on that because getting the word out that it's not okay to make your own trails or stuff like that. Education, I agree, is a huge thing.
Yeah, and I think it's not just educating our members, but it's also educating the public, like maybe the general public or even members in other organizations or groups that maybe do oppose what we do as a hobby. You bring up the mud pits and things like that. I think there's a time and place for all of that. T for T, and I would even say the government's not looking to shut down those activities. I think those are all activities that are valid and people enjoy to do them. There's entire industries based on those activities. Companies like Polaris and Can-Am and all those, they have vehicles specific to those activities. And really, we're not out there trying to push those out and trying to shut that down. But there is an aspect of understanding what the public perception is on certain things. And so McLean Creek's a really good example. A number of years ago on May Long, there was a lot of guys out there enjoying the weekend and doing what they do on a long weekend. And unfortunately, those images hits the news and it hits the newspapers. And before you know what, those trails got shut down and things just got bad. And what we're really trying to do is say, okay, there's areas for certain activities to take place, and then there's areas for those not to take place, and trail braiding and making new trails and areas where you can do things that are not appropriate for that area or in a sensitive environment doesn't look good on our hobby. And like I said, I think it's also educating our kind of opponents in a way, whereas, hey, 4x4 has actually changed a lot. I think you know this from talking to so many different people where in the early 2000s, maybe mud bogging, more kind of your mudding style of off-roading was more of the big thing. But with overlanding becoming so popular, and I would say even like just the general public, people that maybe all they used to do is backcountry ski or mountain bike or hike, those people are all starting to migrate to overlanding because it's, as I said in the beginning, like it's the access point of all of these activities. And those people are not hardcore off-roaders. They're not hardcore mud boggers. And so I think it's really showing the community around us that, hey, we've changed, we've maybe matured in a way. I'm not sure if that's the exact thing to use because they're not that people who are a mud bogger, all that's immature. Being really careful on my wording. But I think that it's just showing the community and in the government bodies that, hey, what we generally do has changed. I've got quite a nice truck. I don't really want to get it destroyed in mud. I don't want to get stuck. And I've been there. I've had my truck on its side in a mud hole with water flowing over the window. I don't need to be there again. Those are things that I think we're trying to educate not just our users, but also the people around us.
You mentioned the people around you, and I know that a lot of organizations are working together with other organizations. So whether it be quad clubs or even mountain biking clubs or hiking clubs and all that stuff, is that something you guys are working together with these other associations or organizations?
Yeah, I would say that the group that we're working the closest with right now would be CARA, or Calgary ATV Riding Association. They're a Calgary based association. And I just want to go back one more second here and just say
Mhm.
T4T really is an Alberta based organization. We do speak for all 4x4 users and trails within the Alberta province. We've got trail reps all the way up in Athabasca. We're working to get somebody up in the Grand Prairie right now, Calgary, Rocky Mountain House, down to Crow's Nest. So we really are a an Alberta based organization. But obviously, Calgary gets a lot of attention. A huge portion of our executive is Calgary based, and a large portion of our trail systems that are very easily accessible are in the Calgary area. And we can get into why and all that in a minute here, but I think it's just important to kind of state that. So CARA is a group that we work with quite closely. They've got a long history of working with the government, working with different user groups, and we're learning a lot from those guys. I think the Four Wheel Drive Association of BC is what we're really looking up to as a kind of in the similar realm of what we're doing, is like this organization that we would strive to be. But CARA it has really paved the way of how they work with the government, Alberta Forestry and Parks, as well as groups like Ghost Watershed Alliance, Trout Unlimited, we've mentioned before, and so forth. So I think it's really important. I think having that input from other stakeholders is really important. From a practical perspective, it's the only way we can get approval on any projects, by working on these groups with, or sorry, all these projects with different groups. The government bodies, they want to know that we have plans that involve these groups. And again, going back to that mixed use trails and collaboration, a lot of these trails get used by mountain, for instance, the Margaret Lake Trail in the
Mhm.
Ghost. I've seen lots of mountain bikes on that trail. I've seen people just hiking it for a day. I've never seen a horse on it, but I wouldn't be surprised. And sorry, I've seen wild horses, but never people riding them. But just there's lots of mixed use on there, and people go out there to go fishing or whatnot. And yeah, again, we're just focused on these mixed use trails and making sure that that access stays open for everybody.
I agree with you 100%. You got to work with these other organizations because if you don't, you're going to fall flat in your face, to be honest with you. Like
Yeah.
we need to work with these other people that are using the outdoor recreation like we are. And they may not be in a 4x4, but they might be on a quad or they might be on a horse or mountain bike or whatever. But we all need to share the land. And there's certain I've been involved with partnerships with like a naturalist club, and we show up to their cleanup, and they saw how wonderful we actually are of people, and they come back to our cleanup, and you start forming those relationships, right? And I agree with you 100% that you guys are on the right track with working with these other organizations. And even if you may see them, not that you see them as, how am I going to word this, not as your enemy, but as somebody that you want to be able to educate, like you mentioned earlier, on how we are becoming better and how we are doing better ourselves, and how we can all coexist in this great outdoors.
Yeah, like last summer, there's so many great experiences last year with T4T and working with other groups. But one of the most memorable kind of events or things that I did last year was we did a trip up to Margaret Lake with Alberta Forestry and Parks, and we had a couple of guys from other groups. So there was EKG, Ghost Watershed Alliance, and we had Trout Unlimited with us as well. And a big part of what we wanted to do is we wanted to go look at the lake, the trails, and make sure that we're maintaining that appropriately based on what all these other stakeholders are looking for, etc. And I got to ride with Elliot from Unlimited. And Unlimited is a group that in the 4x4 community might get a lot of flack. There's always people talking about the fishery and wheels out of water. And having that opportunity to spend 2 hours in my truck with Elliot and getting to ask him questions about, hey, what's the deal with wheels out of water? And why are we so strict on certain aspects? I got to learn so much about what their mandates are and what they want to do in these areas. And Elliot's words were not, hey, we should shut this down because it crossed this creek. Hey, I actually think there's a better way of routing this trail and it would actually make it more fun for you guys. And so when they're looking at these areas, it's not about shutting them down so much as it's how can we make this better and actually make the user experience better? And so
Yep.
I thought that was just really cool. And I've taken so much away from it. And I think it really changed my perspective on what these groups are actually out there doing.
Yeah, a lot of them, like you say, are not out there to shut them down. If we kept on going the way we were before, then maybe there's more of a case for that. But through education and stuff like that, we are doing better and actually listen to these people. A lot of people are surprised to find out that CO officers or people in the parks or whatever the particular government agencies that you're dealing with are actual real people, and a lot of them are outdoorsmen as well too, or outdoors women as well, and they love to get out there and enjoy it themselves, and they don't want these areas shut down, but they have to come to a common agreement between all the users. And a lot of times it's not a job I'd want, you know. They've got numerous
No.
people that they've got to please, and but a lot of them are just regular people like you and I, and they just love the outdoors, and that's why they got into that job to begin with, is because they love the outdoors.
Yeah, we've developed a really good relationship with the Calgary office here. Michael, who is a one of the guys that works there, just a great guy. He's got a Ranger. He still likes to get out there. He enjoys these areas as much as we do. And I think one thing that just came to mind is actually talking about how limited some of those groups even are to even do what they do. For instance, the government in the Calgary office, there's 4 guys in that office, and they look after all the hiking trails, the mountain bike trails, horseback riding trails, as well as 4x4 and ATV trails. And so they have such limited resources to their disposal that really they need groups like us to help them move some of these projects forward and actually bring things to their attention, because they're not, as much as you might
Yeah.
think that they're riding these trails all the time and enforcing certain things, really they don't have the time. And that's where T4T comes in, and we can actually say, hey, I've noticed this happening in this area. Maybe we can put that in a work plan for next year and try to address this issue. And those are the things that we're working on currently with them, for instance, in the Calgary office, is to get work plans together. What do we want to do this summer? And again, it comes down to the education, just knowing what their struggles are and where their limitations are.
100%. I agree with you 100% on that one. So, speaking of projects, Nat, what kind of projects has the TFT been involved with in the past?
Yeah, there's a few projects down south that we've worked on, and some that we would love to get more traction on, but there's some limitations and issues there. But down in Livingston area, there's a few trails that we got opened a number of years ago with one of the old presidents, Andy, who's unfortunately no longer with us. He was a really big push for what T4T is today, and I think our vision for the future. So there's some cool projects or some trails that we were able to open up down there and scope for future projects where we need some bridges, etc. Those are all ongoing in the south area. Mostly this last 2 years, we've been focused on that Margaret Trail loop. That trail is it's one of those most amazing trails that's within this Calgary region, and there's a beautiful lake there, beautiful mountain views, and unfortunately the trail's just gone worn down over the last number of years. Lots of erosion, lots of runoff, and so forth. A lot of the trails in Alberta are old cut lines, seismic lines
Yeah.
that have now been turned into a truck trail, and they're not necessarily in the best spot. They're straight east west. They go through whatever's in their path, and really is how do we maintain a trail that was never really designed to be a trail. And so the Margaret Lake Loop we've really been working on. Margaret Lake itself, there's a huge project that we're working on there, but I can't dissolve or can't give too much away on what we're
Mhm.
working on. But we're looking to improve the user experience there. There's some camping that's going on in the area they're not illegal because we're allowed to camp in that area, but they're too close to the water. And we're trying to work with the government and other user groups. And how do we improve that? How do we maintain that user experience, but make it better for everybody? And so that is a stocked lake, so people can go fishing out. There's a couple of hiking trails out there. And so, yeah, Margaret Lake's just been a huge push for us because I do think that it's one of those areas that we really don't want to lose. Like it's that classic multi-user, multi-mixed use trail in the area. In the Ghost in general, we're also working with EKG, East Kananaskis Ghost, on a sub-regional plan that we are proposing to put forth to the government. And what's really cool about this is that it's not just T for T. Like T for T is only a small portion of this. It's a massive group of all users. We've had people from the Calgary, I think there was like a Calgary planner that was at our first initial meeting where we walked through some maps and we talked and we really got to learn what's the actual footprint of the Ghost. And it's kind of scary. And that's when you overlay every single track, ATV trail, anything that's been in the from the past, forestry. When you put all of that together, it's pretty spectacular to see the footprint that humans actually have on this area. And it really gives perspective as to like why certain things are happening from the government side where they're shutting down certain things when we're trying to limit that linear footprint. And so that's a huge project that we're part of and we're really excited about. Yeah, there's other things like this Smoky sub-regional plan that's up towards Falls and Grand Prairie that we've had some input on and we're working on. Yeah, lots of fun projects, lots to do. Really, we're just a few people on the executive that are passionate about this. And yeah.
That kind of leads me to the next question. So, say if somebody up in northern Alberta, say for example, sees a opportunity where they feel that T for T may be able to assist in something or become involved in something, how do those people come to the T for T with some ideas or suggestions?
Yeah, so what we have is we have trail reps. So trail reps should be
Mhm.
viewed as almost trail managers or area managers. For instance, we have Alex down in Crow's Nest. We've got Yannick up here in the Calgary area. We've got Adam, anything from Calgary up to Rocky Mountain House-ish. And then we have Brian out in the Athabasca area. And then we're looking at getting somebody else as well in Grand Prairie itself because it's such a large area and it's got a lot
Mhm.
going on. There's a lot of things happening in terms of trails, and there's a lot of different user groups that we're maybe not necessarily used to dealing with in the Calgary areas, like snowmobilers and so forth, and more trapping, et cetera, that kind of thing. If somebody wants to bring a idea together, maybe they want to do a trail cleanup, maybe they want to work on a certain project, the best thing to do is to find that local trail rep and start working with them to develop a plan on how to do maybe a trail cleanup or whatever is going on. That trail rep can then bring those ideas to the executive and we can further figure out what's the chances of us actually being able to do anything and how do we want to approach that issue. I think that makes the most sense.
So, is there a list of the area reps on your website or?
Yeah, so we're actually currently looking at redoing our website. We're looking to simplify it. We're looking to just do the FAQs just to get a lot of that basic stuff out there. So do look up
Yep.
trailsfortomorrow.ca. And as I said, we're hoping to launch the new site by June 1st. And there's some other exciting things that's coming with that as well. So that is all happening. And I think that the website's got a lot of decent information right now, but we're looking to simplify it and make it a little easier.
So, I know that in, say, BC, for example, the World Association has a contract to manage some rec sites and maintain rec sites and forest fire lookouts, etc. Does Alberta have that same sort of thing? And is that something that you guys are looking at? If so,
Yeah, the rec site model is something that we've actually put forward to the government. It's something that I think BC does a really good job of. For instance, last year I was out in the Trout Lake area and there were some trails where Full Drive ABC was doing some work. And I just thought it was phenomenal how these local sub regional groups were taking on projects
yeah,
and running with it. And they had I'm assuming probably some insurance from the larger body and so forth. But that's the kind of thing that we want to start doing in our sub-regional groups with those trail managers. But going back to your question, yes, that's something that we would like to push forward more. I think there's a lot of tremendous opportunities for the province where people aren't necessarily looking to go to a massive campground or maybe a provincial style campground where there's lots of RVs. But I think if we had some areas where maybe there was a nice camping node, maximum 5, maybe with some outhouses, an area where people could enjoy a weekend off grid, I think that's something that could really work well in Alberta province. And I think there is a mandate right now where the government actually trying to open up a whole bunch more campgrounds in Alberta for economical impacts. And so I think that rec site model is something that is a little bit more sustainable. It's not so large and would actually help a user group that's maybe not necessarily in the eyes of the government so much. I think when people think about camping in general, they're thinking RVs and they're thinking maybe tents in a larger campground, but they're not really necessarily thinking about the backcountry style experience.
So just because I haven't lived there for 20 plus years, does Alberta have like rec sites kind of idea like BC does, or is it more a wide open thing?
Yeah, so Alberta in general, as far as I know, there are no rec sites as you're familiar with. In most of our campgrounds are all either owned by the Alberta government or they are private style campgrounds. Beyond that, we have public land use zones. So the Ghost is a public land use zone. McLean Creek is public land use zone. Livingston, Crow's Nest, Porcupine Hills, and then up north we have. I think that the sub-regional group is currently looking at that whole Smoky area. And then there's a number of there's Bighorn and a few more to the north as well. Those areas typically are all kind of random camping, like maybe what you'd see in the States or in other areas like BC where maybe there isn't a rec site, but
Yeah.
there's no real rec site that's input by the government, but then user maintained kind of thing.
Okay. I find it in BC, there's lots of rec sites. There's lots of places where I go camping where there's not rec sites, but there's lots of really good rec sites. And it's just nice to have a picnic table and a proper fire ring and stuff like that. And especially when they're maintained, a lot of them by organizations like the Full Time Association of BC or the quad clubs or whatever, the fly fishing clubs and stuff like that. So I would definitely be excited to see something like that start to happen in Alberta for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's something that would get a lot of families and maybe people that are not as rugged of 4 by
Yep.
4 or trail users. And they're just looking for an easy means of getting out there and enjoying nature. It's definitely something that we are talking to the government about. And it's something that I would love to see. There's no promises. I think it would definitely take unfortunately, there's also then, it's not just the local forestry and parks, it's then it becomes a legislative thing.
Yeah.
And for that stuff to go through legislation takes time and maybe they have to get more funding or approvals. And that's not always as fast as we'd like them to be.
Yeah, the good old red tape. So the Trails for Tomorrow has gone through some recent changes. You are the new president, and there's been some changes in this year. One of them is a push towards individual memberships. Maybe you can explain what's going on with the T for T in that way.
Yeah, the focus on memberships really to give our organization a louder voice and the ability to actually get projects done. We've talked a lot about Four Drive of ABC. That's really what we're looking at. We're looking at how they are running their organization in order to get projects done, whether it's through funding or just lobbying the government and having that louder voice through our work with the government in the last year. They've really shown us that, hey, we want to know how many supporting members do you have? How much money are you bringing in that you potentially put towards projects? And those are all really important things. It shows that we have the support of that larger member base. And it will also raise funds for projects that we want to do. It will also help with paying for insurance and things like that, where we really do need some more funding, whether we want to buy a bridge for a trail. there's lots of trails out there that people are like, hey, we got to get this trail open. It needs a bridge. Like, how do we get that? How do we get that trail open? And the government might say, priority wise, it's not necessarily ranking. But if it ranks for our members and we can say, hey, let's do a fundraising effort and let's try to get our membership up where we can buy a bridge, well, that puts us a lot further ahead. And so I think that's why we want to go down that route. I think the one thing that, there's many user groups out there. Calgary has a number of user groups. Typically, what T4T has looked for is those user groups or clubs to support our organization. The problem is when you have clubs, or what they used to be called clubs, now they're Facebook groups, they're pretty fluent. There's no board of directors, there's no real organizational structure. And unfortunately, a lot of them is like, hey, like I'm friends with these guys, so I'm going to start my own thing. And I don't like those guys, so I'm not going to work with those guys. And it doesn't really help us because we're not able to consistently draw from those groups. And there's all these groups, not saying that they don't have a desire to maintain trails and to work with the government and all these other user groups, but really that's not their primary focus. Their primary focus is on the enjoyment of the trails, to get people out there, to educate their membership group and to have fun. And T4T, obviously, we all enjoy those parts of the activity as well. But what we're really trying to do as a group is to bring people together that are like-minded and say, okay, maybe today is not so much about just wheeling this trail and having fun, but it's about maintaining it and doing what we need to do to actually keep it sustainable. So that's why we're trying to go to this membership base. I think it's gonna work out well for us. There's a lot of people that's showing us support and they want to be a part of it. And I think there's a lot of activities that we can do as a membership base like this, or sorry, an organization like this, that are still fun. Hey, like we can still have those campouts and can still have those educational seminars and meetings at expos and stuff where we're hanging out. But overall, the message and what we're trying to do is a little bit different from the clubs in the area.
I think you're on the right track, though. Being based with the work that I've done with the government over on this side of the Rockies, when we've gone to the government and said that, hey, we have X amount of members across the province, they're like, oh, or say that we have 212 members in this area or 130 members and paid members in this area. They're like, oh, we didn't realize that you had that much people behind you and willing to step up as well. So I think going to individual memberships, I think is a really good idea. The clubs are still very important, but the individual memberships with the government, when they look at things like that, and it's very important to them to see that you guys have the backing of all these people. So I think you're definitely on the right track for that, for sure. But yeah, like you say, clubs are still important in that. I think one of the things too, you mentioned that we can still get out and do things with other people in the T4T. And I'll throw my little bit in there as well too, that some of the people that I've met through the 4-Wheel Drive Association in BC are still my best friends. So you never know who you're going to meet at a cleanup or who you're going to meet at a trail repair day or something like that. Like I say, some of these people have been friends of mine for 10 years and we still talk every day kind of ideas. You never know what you'll find out there for people.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think the Facebook groups and the clubs out there are very important for showing new trail users etiquette, where the trails are. For instance, in the Ghost, marked as 39. Don't go by here in the summer or whatever. I think it's really important for those groups to exist, and it's a really good place for new users to wet their feet, if you will.
Yep.
Way just to learn and see what the activity is all about. For instance, one thing that Kara brought up to us last summer was that there was a big blowdown event where a bunch of trees fell down on a horse, or I think maybe even a mountain biking trail type thing out in the Kananaskis area. And the government, like I said, they had 4 guys and they needed more manpower to just go out and clear trails. Well, Kara has all these members with chainsaw certificates and they were able to say, yeah, we can get out there. And they went out and they did this cleanup on a trail that has nothing to do with their ATVs, but because they're a membership the government can rely on and work with, there's a lot of things you can do that are not necessarily directly impacting your activity,
Hmm.
but that will go a long way in the future when it comes to your activity and your trails. Similar to how they go out and they plant willows with Trout Unlimited. So those are all things that we're taking very good note of, and those are things that I think are important for us to do as a community to not just support our own community, but also our people within the area. And then just one last thing, we're going to be taking part with CARA this year on their Starlight organization where they take kids, I believe they're from the hospital and so forth. And it's like the horsepower for kids thing, but it's with ATVs. And for instance, this year we're bringing some 4x4s and bringing a new aspect to the off-road and called Wheeled Fun out there. And there's a lot of fun things that we can do as well. That's not just work as well.
Yeah. No, that's great to hear. That sounds like a really fun event for sure. So going back to the individual memberships, how much is an individual membership and how can somebody join?
Yeah, like I said, we're redoing this website right now. We're currently working on that. So we're going to be doing an e-commerce side where we're going to be able to sell
Okay.
those memberships. Currently, I believe those memberships are slated to be about $30 for an individual, and that's for a year. And then we will also have some corporate memberships as well. And then we will also have discounted memberships through certain organizations. That's all getting structured. We have our next meeting on April 16th. We're going to finalize these details and our goal to have everything up and running by June 1st. June 1st, we will also be doing a raffle style event at the Crave Open House where we're hoping to kickstart this and get things going. That's all. It's very fresh. We just changed our bylaws. The AGM was just here in March. So there's a lot of things happening right now, and we're just trying to get all those details sorted. But I think we're already getting asked a lot by people wanting to join.
Yep.
So in trailsfortomorrow.ca, June 1st, I'm hoping everything's going.
Beautiful. As I mentioned off air, this episode should be coming out on April 25th. And just keep us in mind when the website does go live, and we'll do whatever we can to help promote it for you guys.
Yeah, no, I
Because
appreciate that.
I think it's definitely a worthwhile cause. $30, $40, whatever it's going to end up being, I think is a heck of a deal. You go to McDonald's and you spend $30, right?
Cheap,
So so it's $30, I think, for a organization like this. And to our listeners, if you're in Ontario, same thing with OF4WD or the BC one, etc. $30, $40, whatever it is, totally worth it. Even if you're not super involved in said organization, as we mentioned earlier, that show of support as a number, as well as that cash goes to various projects. So definitely very important to join these organizations as well.
Yeah, like I said, we're not for profit. It's all going to go towards sustainability of these trails, the cleanup efforts, insurance. When we do a trail cleanup, we provide insurance to everybody that's part of that. That's one of the mandates from the government in order to legally do these cleanups. And so all those funds will help us be able to do more. With limited funds in the past, you're only able to do so many cleanups because insurance costs a lot of money and you have to basically get it for every single event that you're doing. We were limited. And just going back to a previous question of, hey, I've got a good idea in this area, or I think this trail needs, if we have these funds and we have those groups or those people in those areas, it'll be a lot easier to actually get those projects done as opposed to 14 people in the Calgary area trying to just get it all done. There's certain things that's just not feasible. Whether I'm able to actually make it up to Athabasca, for instance, to do a project up there, I don't know if that would be possible. But if we've got some good people out there and people who want to maintain those areas, it's a lot easier when there's some funds and there's a group of people that's interested in it.
Alberta is a big province. It's bigger than a lot of countries in Europe. So it's very hard to sometimes to be everywhere doing the good work. But with good volunteers in each of those areas, it can definitely be done. Is there anything that we missed that you wanted to talk about?
I think we talked about a little bit of hurdles that we're facing. I think one of the biggest things that we're facing right now is that there's a lot of expanded use of the public lands, whether it's for economic reasons, recreational reasons, environmental interests. It doesn't leave a lot of room for growth. And for instance, forestry had made a big push in some of these more sensitive areas that are closer to population centers. And the growth of these population centers has also put a lot of pressures on local areas. And I think those are some of the things that we're fighting the most. Is just making sure that these areas can stay clean, can stay sustainable for us to be able to continue to enjoy without overcrowding and so forth. So those are things that we're dealing with a lot. There's also a lack of government funding. We are a member of AHOVA, and there are some funds that we get from AHOVA. But again, it's T for T that needs to push that sustainability projects forward for the trail users. And so those are things that we're all struggling with. And that's what keeps us busy.
They definitely have lots on the go, that's for sure. Kudos to all of you and all of your volunteers. This is a totally volunteer-run association, and without volunteers, right from people in the executive, but also all those people out doing the cleanups and putting the hard labor work in, every one of those people is needed. And my hat's off to every single one of them, because without them, none of this would be happening. So thanks to you and all your volunteers.
Yeah, no, thanks, Wes, for having me on here. I think it's great to be able to speak about T4T. I also think that it's great time with this membership coming and all that. I think it's really good to get the word out there, what we're doing. Like you said, we're all volunteers and we're just out there trying to make a difference and making sure that we can keep these trails for a long time. And there's going to be some things that are going to upset some people, but overall, what we're trying to do is just to make sure that the message that we send forth to the general public or the greater public that are maybe not enjoying these same activities is that, hey, we are all responsible trail users. We're trying to maintain them and we're trying to do what's best for these areas by working with each other and all these other stakeholders in these areas to maintain them. So
I think you're definitely on the right track in regards when you mentioned about it's not just for the hardcore off-road users, but it's also the other groups, right? Mountain bikers and stuff like that. You take a look at how many people are driving around with a rooftop tent now, and they're getting a little farther out each time. And that is just exploded. They may be mountain bikers first, or they may be hikers first, but they're still using their vehicle, their Tacoma or whatever, to get farther out into nature. So we definitely have to work and talk with them people for sure.
That's my personal journey. I started off as a mountaineer, hiking, biking, that kind of thing. Bought a Tacoma, put a rooftop tent on it, started using it more. And eventually now I have 2 kids and all that other stuff is not quite as easily done, but at least I can still go out off-roading for a weekend or I can go camping with the kids for a weekend. And so a lot of people follow a very similar journey. And maybe they don't, but they then incorporate that camping. Maybe they're mountain biking in the Bright Creek area, but then they want to go camp off grid in their truck overnight. And so that's where people who are not necessarily 4x4 users, or they don't even see themselves as a 4x4 user, are starting to a little bit and start using these trail systems as well.
Yep. For perfect example, like myself, I almost prefer a day kayaking on a lake, almost sometimes more than four-wheeling or mountain biking or whatever. So a lot of us 4x4 users are outdoor recreationists, and it's just another way of getting out there and enjoying the outdoors. Once again, we're talking to Vil from Trails for Tomorrow, and you can reach them on their website at trailsfortomorrow.ca.
Trailsfortomorrow.ca, yeah.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, there'll be a new one coming out at the beginning of June, and we'll definitely let you guys know when that comes out live as well. And we 100% recommend joining up as a member. And you can also reach them at Trails for Tomorrow on Facebook and Instagram, and go from there. But Vil, I want to thank you for coming and joining on tonight. I truly believe in what you guys are doing, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys got coming up next year.
Yeah, no, thanks, Wes. I really do appreciate this opportunity. We got some fun projects coming. I think we're going to make a big difference in this province, and I'm excited to where we're going.
Definitely can be a fun ride, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be busy, that's for sure.
Exactly. Awesome.